It's time to bring you yet another amazing episode. And now, welcome your host.
This is The Backstory with Omobola Stephen. It's a balanced, objective, unbiased and disruptive conversation on government and politics. We shine more light on what has not worked and what would make it work. And now, to the finest, personable and engaging host extraordinaire, Omobola Stephen. Tune in.
Now, the nagging questions on the minds of many is that how can we begin to put an end to the global issues that is bedeviling the world today? There's been countless debates on how to put an end to the myriad of problems that we are facing as society today. And how can it be solved? But really, there seems to be no headway as all these problems keep abating by the day. Now, on the backstory, we like to address these issues, shedding more light on what has not worked and what will make it work. Now, on the show, join me as professionals and thought leaders share destructive yet constructive mindship conversations on topics on the government and politics. Now, I would like to join me on the show today because I'll be talking about social justice, how we can get it right. Today, I have Bello, who is an attorney, author, podcaster, and also a social justice advocate on the show with me. Welcome, Bello, to the Backstory with Omobola Stephen.
And an author. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on the show. Bello is an attorney. He's also an author, a podcaster, just as I am, and he's a social justice advocate. Good to have you once again on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Happy to be
All
here.
right. Happy to have you on the show once again. Mark, why do you have a passion for justice?
Well, I practiced law for almost 50 years and represented ordinary citizens who were wronged, if you will, in various settings. A lot of those clients were inspirations for some of the books I wrote. Some of them are completely made up and fictional, based on perhaps events in the news, but some of them were based on actual cases that I handled. So from the very beginning of my career, I was a pro-justice citizens advocate, and that's what my writing has focused upon.
All right. Now, do you think that there is anything that stops people from standing up for their right?
Well, as I indicated, I've been around the justice system for a long time, and political movements, political changes, atmospheric changes in America and around the world certainly change what happens in court. Here in Michigan, where I live, for instance, back in the 90s and early 2000s, we had a very conservative Republican governor who passed a lot of anti-justice legislation and led to a significant and by the way, appointed very conservative Supreme Court justices in the state. And that led to a large amount of bad decisions for our citizens. Governor Whitmer, who is the governor now, and Governor Granholm, who is now a cabinet secretary of President Biden's, were instrumental in reversing some of those bad decisions. But politics plays a huge role in the justice system, and it has ebbs and flows, and it goes back and forth. And hopefully, as you saw in the Supreme Court decisions recently, nationally, there's nothing in the Constitution that gives the president immunity from prosecution, yet a conservative Supreme Court found that it does. So those kinds of things certainly affect a citizen's ability to get justice, at least in America.
And now you emphasize the justice system. I like to ask this question really from you. Do you think that there are some set of people who are most ignored by the justice system? Why is this so?
Do I think they're ignored?
Yes.
I think that we're not all treated equally, and I don't think that we have a system of justice that is universally fair. So, for instance, a person, a black person on trial in Alabama might receive a different verdict than a black person on trial in Michigan or on trial in Massachusetts. Red state, blue state, justice seems to have different outcomes. Even if you forget red state, blue state, the question about whether or not you can get a jury of your peers is an issue in our justice system. So do I think it's universally fair? Do I think people are ignored? It's not universally fair, and yes, people are ignored. For the most part, though, it's a worthy system and one that tries, probably better than the rest, to administer justice fairly.
Now you have experienced what victims face when they stand up for justice. Can you share some experience with my audience?
Well, I kind of just alluded to it. You see, for instance, a celebrity like Trump or a celebrity like O.J. Simpson exonerated when they probably shouldn't be. And you see, for instance, if you look at Barry Scheck's Innocent Project in America, a lot of innocent people who were convicted. So it can be a tough system to beat, even if you're innocent. It can be a fair system if all the factors at play go in your favor. But injustice happens. I'm not going to say it doesn't. We don't always get it right. And that's the problem. One of the things that led me to become an attorney, and one of the passions I have, not only as an attorney, but as an author, is to at least work for a system that gets it right. And the one thing about our system is, even if we get it wrong, there are lots of mechanisms in place for us to eventually get it right.
Thank you for that, Mark. Now, when a person finds their power, really, why do they think it is the right time for them to begin to abuse it?
Well, I can't speak for people that think it's right to abuse power. It's obviously not. Unfortunately, ego gets in the way, money gets in the way, a sense of privilege gets in the way. I will tell you this: if you look, for instance, at the Alec Baldwin case, the accidental shooting on the set of the movie Rust, if you watch any of that on court TV, Alec Baldwin became very human in that case. And if you saw the end of it, he broke down in tears after being exonerated, which for most people, while a terrible tragedy, was really an unfortunate accident, especially when it comes to him. And I thought that the trial humanized him a great deal. We tend to look up to celebrities who perhaps don't deserve being looked up to, And sometimes they get privilege, and sometimes they're treated in bad ways because of their privilege. I think he's an example of someone who they tried to make an example of by overcharging him in a situation where the occurrence was an unfortunate accident. So sometimes celebrity works to your advantage, sometimes it works to your disadvantage. But power tends to, most people in power don't tend to abuse it. Most people in power tend to handle it appropriately, or as appropriately as their ego will allow. But those few that do abuse it, and in my opinion, and it's my opinion only, Donald Trump is a great example of that. When you become the kind of person who abuses power, you become a very dangerous person. And the system has checks and balances typically for handling that and bringing power to its knees. Hopefully, that will happen in his case eventually.
Right now, so talking about Trump, I'd just like us to talk a bit about how Trump has been evading the things that he has done wrong. How on earth does he get away with it?
The biggest problem with the legal system is time. When you have two sides to a story, you have to give both sides ample room to tell their story. You also have mechanisms in place that assure that the system provides means to justice, and there is no rush to judgment. That's why we have courts of appeals. That's why we have a Supreme Court. That's why we have various levels of court at the state level, at the state system, at the city system, municipal system, and at the federal level. So, unfortunately, if you like one side or the other, unfortunately, because the system has lots of checks and balances and the ability to appeal and the ability for a judge to hear motions and review pleadings and be taken up on appeal and appeal all the way to the Supreme Court if you have to, those things take a lot of time. And in Trump's case, for instance, time is his friend. He, running for office in November, if he wins, all of those cases will go away because he'll pardon himself. If he loses, he still has many grounds for appeal, many chances to appeal. Some judges, like Judge Cannon in Florida, who seem to be biased for him, some judges who may not care for him. But he's got a lot of ways to prolong this and make it take a long time. And in some instances, the fact that a case takes a long time is almost by itself an exoneration for him. The longer these cases take, the better for him, and that's his desired outcome. If he can't win them, he can at least delay them. And the system allows for those delays, sometimes fairly, sometimes unfairly.
And now, you published a book in 2016. It was titled Betrayal of Justice. And as such,
Yes.
a very interesting book. For such time as this, really, but your predictions in this book are sort of coming to pass now. What are you going to say to that?
Well, I wrote Betrayal of Justice when Donald Trump first ran for office. I listened to some of the things he was saying. His rhetoric and his speech and the bad things he advocated troubled me. And I said to myself, what would happen if a billionaire bigot, because he seemed to be saying things that made him sound very bigoted to me, what would happen if somebody like that ran for office and won? Now, I want you to know that I wrote the book before he won. So the book was finished and published before the 2016 election was decided. The book spoke about a very evil criminal president who did very bad things to individuals who disagreed with him and to the public at large, especially those who represented the party that he was not a member of. And it was basically a parody on the president that I thought could result from the kind of behavior that he exhibited as a candidate. I had no idea that the book would be prophetic, that it would come to pass. I didn't think he'd win the election, and I didn't think he'd be as evil and as disagreeable as a president as he was as a candidate. But the MAGA movement saw the book, started to criticize me and attack me as doing, quote, a hit job on the president. And I had to remind people that I wrote the book before he became president. So if they saw a similarity between my president and their president, that was on Trump, not on me. He acted like my guy. My guy didn't act like him. But it's a very interesting book for people who want to see what somebody's viewpoint was back in 2016 of what a Trump presidency would look like. And unfortunately, a lot of the things I wrote in the book became true.
Thank you, Mac and Bello, for that insightful discussion we had today. Do you have any exciting news or any upcoming projects that you think is going to be beneficial to the audience? You can share that now.
Exciting news. I have a new children's book on distracted driving called Asher's Distracted Adventure, I think it's called. Asher's Distracted Lesson, excuse me. I have a new Zachary Blake novel. All of my novels, 9 of my novels are Zachary Blake legal thrillers. And the latest one is called The Anti-Semite Next Door, about the scourge of anti-Semitism in America. Just quickly, I've written books on immigration, novels about the immigration crisis, a book about cops shooting innocent black men at a traffic stop. You mentioned the book about the presidency. I wrote a book about the clergy abuse crisis in the Catholic Church, a book about cops protecting cops in bad situations, a book about school shootings and how the legal system might treat those. So I've written a lot of books that are relevant to the kinds of things that are happening in America today. I've also written a couple of whodunits that might be of interest to people who like mysteries. If you go to my website at markmbello.com, you'll see all the books, and they can all be purchased on Amazon and other online booksellers. I'm a self-published author, so most of the books are only available online. You can't find them in bookstores.
Thank you once again, Mark Bello. You are an attorney, an author, a podcaster, just like him, and a social justice advocate. Thank you for sharing your time and your valuable contribution to the topic of discussion on today's show, talking about social justice and how we can begin to change the narratives. I and my audience
I hope
of
so.
the backstory with the Omobola Stephen, we wish you the best of luck in all of your projects now and in the future.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. If you'd like to catch up with any missed episodes of the Backstory with Omobola Stephen, you can do so on any cross-promotion platforms or any podcast distribution platforms you bump into online. Do join me for another transformative and destructive yet constructive mindship conversation on topics on the government and politics on the Backstory with Omobola Stephen. I'm your host, Omobola Stephen. Thank you, Mac.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe and leave us a review.